I was so happy when Cory reached out and said, hey, we did this insanely complex installation, a group of us together, and would you consider bringing the whole caboodle to New York and showing it again? And when I started looking at the images, I was like, wow, this is like a huge, massive installation, but luckily this is a huge, massive space. So we knew that we could easily accommodate everything here, and it looks absolutely fantastic. And I love that the installation and all of you coming together really hit directly the history of true large-scale industry, but also what contemporary making looks like today through a wide variety of different materials. So whose idea was it at first to do this project?
So I've been working with salvage materials for years, and then just from doing that, everyone in Pittsburgh, developers, demolition companies knew me as someone that took heavy, dirty objects that they didn't want to throw away. Years of doing that, I was able to get access to a huge collection of salvage foundry patterns. So they're wooden forms that are used to press in the sand. You remove the form and pour steel into it to make a steel part, and that's how everything is made in a foundry. I didn't realize how much I was getting when I started moving it, but 10, 26-foot box trucks later, I realized I had way more material than I would ever be able to get through on my own. And that's where the idea of bringing in other artists and people I've known and shown with but never collaborated with, getting them in and get their ideas flowing. And it's been the best experience of my career. I watched my artwork improve, feeding off of ideas from the other artists. Everything I've done has gotten better because of the, one, if it's a stupid idea that I have, no one's shy about sharing that. But there's no ego involved. It's just everyone wants to see the other's work in the best light. So it's been really phenomenal.
What did you think when you were asked to be a part of this?
Oh, I got on board right away because it is a great group of people. I've worked with all of them for years and years. Actually, AJ's down the hall from me in my building, which is a big industrial building, much like the one we went through today, much like this one. So we were already like collaborating in many ways, doing shows together. I've always been in shows with Cory through the AAP. Nate, I've known for over a decade, worked with him. We actually did a show at the what's it called? Architectural Digest home show that they have here every year. I did that with Nate and Jason Boone from Urban Tree. And who else? And then I come from a family of artists, obviously, Grace being one of them. My parents both went to RISD, and I have 3 other children who are also artists. And
all of them are
yeah, they're all.
Wow.
And my brothers as well. So, but my brother is a glass blower, and so I'm very familiar with the glass blowing world. And so I was very excited to meet our other member who is not here, but his name is Brian Engel, and he's a glass blower, and he also head up part of the glass on what's called Glass Center on Penn Avenue for like 10 years. So it's a great group of people, and everybody is like Cory said, very generous with their critique and with their talents, and it's really made us all better artists, and it's also made being an artist less isolating, quite frankly.
People forget that all the time, how isolating it is in reality to be an artist, because you're so often locked in your head in your studio trying to come up with your ideas, and then when you realize that talking about ideas and collaborating with others often unleashes even more creativity. So I remind artists all the time, like, do not be a loner.
Yeah.
Don't be a hermit. Like, actually talk, share. Like, let down the wall and let people in. Since you have the mic,
Okay.
why don't we talk about your work? You have
Okay.
2 paintings in the exhibition.
3.
Oh yeah, there are 3.
That's
There's
okay.
a lot of work in this show.
Yeah, there is.
So why don't we start with this monumental and gorgeous painting?
Thank you. This is so this actually a lot of this work here. I kind of touched upon it. We actually showed in Milwaukee at the Groman Museum there, and it was the first time we actually did a show as a collective, and so we weren't at that point really working on pieces collaboratively as like together as a group, which we're doing now more. So it was more about showcasing us both as individual artists and how we work as one sort of like entity, being a collective, and showing, I think for the first time for many people, especially at the Groman Museum, who never once had an abstract piece of work in their museum ever, and they were terrified by me. Yeah, the showing how all of this sort of works together, and how, you know, you can, through at least the work that I do, how it's like eliciting more of an emotion rather than depicting a scene. And so I think it's interesting to have the two side by side, so you get the sense of like, well, you can see the heat that these men are enduring in this piece by Cory, but then, you know, hopefully you can feel the heat emanating from what I'm doing here. So I think and then everybody else has, you know, is taking bits of that we have experienced going through foundries, which we do often, and speaking to people in the steel industry, and just sort of using these patterns also as inspiration, which we do all the time, and just really getting a sense of how that all works together, much like a factory works together. You know, you have all these different components, and we kind of represent different facets of how, you know, this art collective works together. So,
Brilliant, thank you. AJ, why don't you talk about your work? You work in porcelain and other forms of ceramics, and the work is absolutely gorgeous. I will say there are lots of links in all of this work that, you know, beyond emotion, color, materiality, obviously. What got you excited about being part of the collective?
Well, working with my friends is probably the most exciting part, you know, because it's true, like cognitive science has taught us, we learn and make better things by being together always. But on a real tangible level, Cory got these patterns, and if we don't know what patterns are, there's one in the back that we'll walk to eventually that is like a direct representation of what I'm talking about. But they're basically these very intricate wooden objects that were made by hand about 100 years ago. And the way that they are constructed are typically either just one piece or two pieces that are fairly symmetrical and put together, and that is by design so that you could cast them, right? They take these and they press them into a casting sand, they pour the steel into them. So there's many similarities between that process and some traditional clay making processes, slip casting. And when I saw the patterns themselves, the first thing I thought was there's an Italian modernist sculptor, Torre Satsas, that I've never read that he did this, but he must have walked into a steelmaking pattern workshop and seen the way that the Italians do this, which of course is in typical Italian style. Each piece that is being cast has its own bold color that's coordinated with the order in which you cast them. He must have seen those.
So interesting.
And
to think, like, is there a Memphis connection to that?
100%. So I'm convinced that that part of his style was derivative of, in an amazing way, the very functionality of the steel making process, of the casting process. So that was the first thing that caught my eye. And then second of all, a lot of my work I've developed, each color you see on this and on the other pieces, each color is a separate piece of porcelain. It's not painted on, it's constructed that way. And the patterns, the wood models, are like the most intricate parquet floor you can imagine. Each wood solid object is made from 100 or more different small pieces of wood. And that immediately made me think, how can I translate this to my own work in a representational abstract way? So it was just exciting to see Cory and Nate come in with boxes of these really amazing, in their own right, art pieces of craft, and they were inspirational.
Thank you. And I bet a lot of people don't know that in the Pittsburgh region actually also has a tradition of clay, over on the border between Pennsylvania and West Virginia, the silts and the clays along the Ohio River in that particular area are really, really great for ceramics. Does anybody know that's where Fiesta ware comes from, for example? So if you're ever in Pittsburgh, go to the Fiesta outlet, which is like 45 minutes drive away. But what got you into clay as a medium in the first place?
Rejection.
Everybody can relate if you're an artist.
I went to, I did not study art in school. I just hung out. I got to hang out in the art lab at Appalachian State, and got to weld. Welding was what I did. And I went to Penland to weld. And I was welding at Penland, and one of the great things they do there among building community with people is the teachers have such insight. And the teacher said, I like what you're doing. Go take a pottery class. and I was just crestfallen because I was really into welding these chairs. And I sat down. Nicholas Jerling, who's still there and in Asheville, was the instructor. And he still gives me glaze recipes to this day. But I sat down and it just clicked automatically. It was one of those moments that this is the thing I should be in my hands.
Yeah, thank God for that. It worked. Not to say the chairs were bad. I haven't seen them. But let's go over here and talk about Cory's monumental painting, which is just such a showstopper and obviously very on point with the theme. But why don't you talk a little bit about where the image comes from? Is it real? Is it imagined? All of those fun things.
So I grew up in Pittsburgh in the 80s. It was at the tail end of the steel industry. Everything was being destroyed and knocked down. Thousands of jobs lost, whole communities decimated. And when I was young, I just thought, well, they closed the mills, so the jobs left. And then, as I got older, and then especially starting to work in the subject matter, a lot of the images are from historic photos, photo archives. I'll look at thousands of them. Like, it's a great rabbit hole to go down. And then a lot of times I'll just make my own images out of those, sketching, and then apply it to this is a wood panel. But to me, the idea was, how do I show the scale and power of the steel mills? And, through this patterns project, what I started to learn more and more when I was researching and reading about steel and talking to my relatives who had worked in mills was it was way more than just a job. It's a real creative process. So any foundry, forge, mill, manufacturing center that you go into, the people that work there are brilliant. They're experts in materials. They're experts in physics, chemistry, and they're not afraid to fail. They're being given these problems by their customers and clients that no one can solve, and no one has ever been asked to solve them. So they have to figure it out on the fly. So it really, to me, struck a nerve with what the Industrial Revolution was all about were super intelligent people that weren't afraid to get their hands dirty. They had no technology to work with. There was no CAD, no CNC machines, no computers, but somehow they were able to draw all the designs by hand, build all the patterns by hand, cast these things, machine them without any help, and build everything. And I wanted to tell that story. It started off as historic representation. We're moving into contemporary processes and showing what they're doing today. They build everything: aerospace, power grid modernization, solar, wind. All the components for these things come through manufacturing and industry, but they're not good at telling the story. So I kind of saw this was a way for me to honor, my heritage and the shared industrial heritage, at the same time kind of help update public perception as to what these places do and what their necessity is, moving forward. So this is on, nice, clean wooden panels. The large sculptural piece behind you is done on a salvage pattern that was used to cast ladles. So they would have to make a wood mold the same size as this ladle to create the steel piece that then carries 80 to 100 tons of molten steel overhead all day long. And if you worked in there, that's a lot of responsibility. If you're not paying attention, if you're, slacking, it's, it could be injury or death to you or the people you work with. But when you leave, the entire environment around you, you've had a hand in building, which you can point to your kids or to your friends and say, we built this. And there's a tremendous amount of meaning that's, imbued in that, which I think is being lost as we're moving away from hands-on activity and work and kind of succumbing to the idea that we're controlled by technology instead of seeing it as a tool to help us improve our own work and controlling it to make greater and better things.
Yeah,
Hope that answered it.
Thank you. And I hope all of you can come up close. Make sure you don't step on the eggs, even though those are much more resilient than regular eggs as they're made out of concrete. But come up and look at the texture of the work, because when you capture the wood grain coming through, it's just so absolutely beautiful and really takes your eye onto a really wonderful journey deep in there. So just as reference, by the way, these are the types of molds that AJ was talking about before, just as I'm assuming those are found molds and then the glass elements are put in.
These are called core boxes.
Yep.
So they're separate, and these are the patterns.
Patterns, yeah.
What we would call a model.
Brian Ingles, the glass artist, so he did sand casting with these. They might all be stuck down. But this is what you would press in the sand to then cast the mold in steel. Brian does them in glass. They're just beautiful objects. And we're scaling up now to do really large, 3-foot gears, and so salvage material is a big thing for us. Brian got access to 10,000 pounds of lead crystal.
Wow.
It's all salt and pepper shakers from an old hotel that closed out in the 30s that sat in a warehouse. So once he's building a new studio now, we're going to start melting and pouring out of that lead crystal. That's some really interesting stuff.
One big salt shaker.
And it's going to be a very big salt shaker, and I can't wait to see.